This is Algebra 1, Lesson 30A, Algebraic Phrases, Part 2. The sum of a number and 7. We're going to be adding, and what are we going to add? We're going to add a number and 7. So here's our number, and we're adding it to 7. So that's the sum of a number and 7. 7 less than a number would be 7 less than the number. Now, the previous one, remember that that's the same as saying 7 plus n, but this is not the same as saying 7 minus n. These are not the same. So this would be the only acceptable answer. The opposite of a number, so I'm going to write the number and take its opposite. The opposite of a number, decreased by 5. So take away 5. The opposite of a number decreased by 5. The sum, so we're going to be adding two things, of the opposite of a number and negative 5. The sum of the opposite of a number and negative 5. Now we can simplify right here. We could say the sum of the opposite of a number and negative 5 is the same as that difference. And I would go ahead and simplify that. The product, so we're going to be multiplying twice a number. Here's twice a number and 8. So we've got twice a number and we're going to multiply it by 8. We could also say twice a number and we could multiply that by 8 like this. Twice a number multiplied by 8. The sum, so we're going to be adding, of twice a number and negative 5. The sum of twice a number and negative 5 could be simplified to this. 5 times, what are we going to be multiplying by? We're multiplying the sum. So we're going to need them to do the sum first, so we'll have to put it in parentheses. Of twice a number, and this is a sum, and negative 5. And I could simplify that and say 5 times the sum, and that would be 2n minus 5, because we know that adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting. They get a little longer, don't they? 6 times the sum. So we're going to indicate that they need to do the sum first with some parentheses. So I really don't need that little multiplication symbol because this up against the parentheses will indicate multiplication. So 6 times the sum of twice the opposite of a number. Wow. Twice the opposite of a number. The sum of twice the opposite of a number and, I'm going to move this, negative 8. Now that could all be simplified a good bit. Let me see in the book. They don't simplify it, but that could be simplified a good bit. You could say 6 times the sum. We could write this as negative 2n. And we can change this to a minus. Okay, and that would be the same thing. The product of 7, so we're going to have 7 multiplied by something. We're multiplying the product of 7 and the sum of a number and 10. So we've got to indicate that I want you to do the sum before we multiply, because I'm saying the product of 7 and the sum. So inside the parentheses, we're adding the sum of a number and 10. So the sum of a number and 10. The sum of 3 times a number. So here we go. We've got another sum. So 3 times a number and negative 4. But that sum, now they're telling us, is multiplied by 5. I would put that up front. Now I would simplify this a bit and change that to 3n minus 4. The sum of negative 10 and 6 times the opposite of a number. So we're going to have a sum of negative 10 we're going to add to it 6 times the opposite of a number. Now, I could put all of this in parentheses, but there's nothing multiplied by the sum, so I don't have to have that. So the sum of -10 and 6 times the opposite of a number. -10 and 6 times the opposite of a number. Now, that could be simplified. That could also be rearranged. I'm going to simplify it here. I'm going to say -10 plus, and then that would be a -6n if I multiply that, which would be the same as -10 minus 6n, because you're adding the opposite, which is like a subtraction. Okay, now I'm looking at the book, and they rewrote it, and they had the 6 times the opposite of n first, and then they subtracted the 10, because we know that adding a -10 is the same thing as subtracting a 10. Okay, and you say, well, I didn't think we could turn that around. Well, yeah, we can turn it around as long as the signs stay with what's in front of it. And they're telling us to write it as a sum anyway, so we're adding a negative. Okay, so these, be encouraged. These take a little bit of practice, but you can get it. Just remember to decode each part. Remember what your code words mean. You can do it.